I'd like to thank you again for purchasing your V-Flex Implicit training system. We really are excited about having you be part of what V-Flex is doing in implicit training. So today, we're going to spend some time explaining how to assemble your baseball pitching 7 or your baseball pitching 5 or your softball pitching 5 or your softball pitching 7. So they are so similar that we're not going to do 4 separate videos. The arches are basically the same with the exception of just a different number of pieces for building the arch. The stands are the other difference that we have. We have a tripod for the baseball pieces and a stand for the softball pieces, and really no need to do the 4 videos for that. So we're just going to simply take our time, show you the various little pieces that make the pieces different for baseball pitching and for softball pitching, and then we should have no trouble assembling these pieces. Now, before we begin the assembly, I want to make sure that you have all of your components for this baseball pitching 7, because it will be our base unit that we'll work off of today. Now, you'll have 6 pieces of the arch that will make the larger arch for this component. You'll also have a shadow net that goes around that arch for making the shadows and the shades, for helping the brain build depth and precise details about that space that you want your pitchers to throw through. You'll also receive a sandbag for stability. You'll have an instruction manual and an assembly manual in your little envelope that comes in the packet. And then you'll have nuts and bolts and screws to put it all together. And I went ahead and put together the tripod for the baseball, and I'll show you a little bit later how I put that thing together. It's a real simple tripod, no problem at all to put together. So if you have all of the components for this piece in your packet today, then you're ready to assemble your baseball pitching 7. So let's get started. One of the easiest things to do in the assembly is to assemble the tripod. The tripod, a very simple, conventional tripod. You'll have a hub or a middle component, and your legs will simply attach to that. Now, when they come in your packet, you'll have 3 tubing parts and 3 insert parts that will allow you to vary the distance and the height of your piece. But I went ahead and put these together just for ease of assembly today. And what we're going to do, we're just going to simply attach those to that hub, set them to the side, and then we'll work on the larger arch and the more difficult parts of this assembly. So we'll simply put one here, take one of the bolts, and you can either use lock nuts or wing tips. I like to use wing tips because I like to make these things as versatile as I possibly can. So all we'll do is just simply put our legs on here. Line our holes up. At some point when we finish the arch, we'll actually attach it to this tripod. That completes the assembly of the tripod section of this component. Now, just remember, the wing tips will go at the top, and then you have a couple of knobs that make it much easier to move these pieces and raise them and lower them. So put the knobs at the bottom, the wing tips at the top, or lock nuts up here, and you'll be ready to attach your arch to this hub and tripod just in a moment. Let's begin the assembly of the baseball pitching 7. Now this piece will have 6 arch pieces, and we'll take the very bottom piece and begin with it. So I want to take the piece that has the double bar on the bottom, and I want to insert it into this net component. Now, the net is on a piece of cardboard for a reason. It makes it easy to insert this arch piece, but we want to take and make sure that our white bungee cord runs along the top edge of that cardboard. And if it does, we can insert this piece all the way through this net. Okay, that's what we should have. We should have the bungee cord on this side, just like so. Now we can actually remove the cardboard from the net, and then we'll put the other pieces together. Okay, now a little tip. One of the best tips I can give you is to take one of the loose ends of the shadow net and stick it in the hole right here in the very center of this thing so that it stays in place and doesn't move while I'm doing the assembly. So that's just one of the tips I've learned through the time here. So now let's go ahead and grab our other pieces that are color coded and put this on. A little tip on putting the nuts and the bolts in: make sure that you stick the bolt toward the inner part of the circle and keep the nut on the inside. It really does help from tearing that net later on during usage. Once we've got it loosely bolted together, we're going to take the final two ends and join those together. That looks really good. Sometimes we have to press down on it, work with it just a little bit to get those final two holes to line up. And now I'm going to put my bolts and nuts on. I'm going to tighten everything down, and then we'll be ready to deploy the net around the entire circumference of this arch before we attach it to our tripod here that we've already assembled. Now comes the fun part, deploying the net. Now, a couple of tips on the net before I begin to take it around the circumference of this arch. Again, I mentioned early on to put one end of the black net into the center hole here, and it just holds the net in place as I deploy it. And then the other was to make sure that the bungee cord is on the inside part of this net. Now, I'm going to begin to move around this arch, and what I want to do is find the other tag end of the black net, the loose end of the black net, and I just want to begin with it and start taking it around the net, making sure that this really thick outer cord stays downward so that when I get it really good and tight, that black cord is on the perimeter of this arch. At about the midpoint, the bungee cord begins to get a little tight. So what you have to do is put the bungee cord in one hand and move your net with the other. And that'll be what you'll do for the remainder of moving. I'm working my way back to the center where the other tag end is, and then I'm going to tie those together once I finish up deploying the net all the way around the circumference. So now I have two loose ends. I'm just going to tie those together temporarily, and then I'm going to go back around and make sure that my thick outer cord is on the outside perimeter of this arch. Simply want to emphasize the importance of the poly ties at this point. To keep the distortion down, to keep this black cord from really weaving around through this framing system, you really do need to make sure that you put your poly ties on this outer edge or some type of zip tie, depending on what comes in your packet. Now, where the joint comes together on the net, we also want to tie it together with these. You'll get plenty of extras. You should have about 25 to 30 poly ties to tie this thing about every foot, 16 inches or so, and then make sure you tie your joint together, and you'll be ready to put this piece on to that tripod. We're at the final piece of assembly for this baseball pitching 7. So, in your packet, you will have a 3-inch 5/16 bolt, and I'm going to go ahead and put that bolt in through this bottom bar with a washer on it, and then I'm going to take my tripod and I'm going to place it on that bolt. Now, that tripod will only fit in one direction, so slide it on that bar, and then put your lock nut there, and then we're going to simply tighten that down, and we'll be ready to stand it up. And the final piece, the sandbag. The sandbag we'll place at the base. Some people can hang them. I've seen people hang them in the center, and that's fine as well. Don't really matter to us as long as the piece is stable. Now, if you live in a windy area, if you use it outside a lot and the wind blows a lot where you are, you may need to purchase extra sandbags, and we have those in stock. Now, that completes the assembly of this baseball pitching 7. And don't forget that the baseball pitching 5 is identical, with the exception of having 5 pieces in the arch instead of 6 pieces in the arch. Again, let me thank you for choosing V-Flex as your implicit training provider. And man, we're excited to have you. Can't wait to see those results that you get from this system. As we've mentioned throughout the video, the baseball pitching arches and the softball pitching arches are identical. They just simply have a different base. So what I want to do now is show you how to attach the softball base to this arch. Now, in your packet, you will have a base setup, which would be 2 longer legs and 3 cross pieces. And we're going to loosely just bolt those together so that they move, relatively easily for us to actually attach these 2 pieces together. So, I'm going to take and I'm going to set this on the ground. I'm going to put my 2 bolts in to the holes where the color-coded locations are. We have one right here, and we have one over here. Now, we have those 2 bolts in, and we're just simply going to put them through the frame into their color-coded locations. We'll put the lock washers on. Tighten those 2 down first, and then in the very end, we're going to stand this thing up and tighten down and make sure that the base is completely aligned, straightly aligned, and then we'll tighten down all of the cross pieces in this base, and you'll be ready to use it for your softball pitching 7. Good. It looks good and straight, and I'll take this time to tighten all of the nuts and bolts down in my cross pieces, and I'll be ready to use this softball pitching 7 with the Implicit training system. Once I've tightened all of the bolts down, got the base secured for this softball pitching 7, I'm ready to actually put my sandbag down. I'll just put the sandbag on top of the cross pieces, and it's ready to use. Now, don't forget, just like in the baseball side, that this 7 is identical to the 5 with the exception of having 5 pieces in the arch instead of 6 pieces in the arch, but the assembly is identical. So again, if you have any questions, just give us a call and we'll be glad to answer those questions for you and walk you through the assembly if you need any help at all. And thank you again for purchasing B-Flex and being part of this Implicit training system.